I am joined today by a man named Steve, who has had a bad back recently. So if you're going to wiggle, you wiggle and jiggle as much as you need to, mate. That's fine. Hello, Steve.
Hello there. How
Um,
are you?
I'm not too bad, but I mean, you fell off a ladder recently. That's not
Yeah,
so
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gravity for you.
It gets you down
Yeah.
every time. So you are working for, or speaking to us about an organisation called Mercy Air. We met at the gathering a little while back, and I just found it fascinating what you're doing. So just for people who don't know what Mercy Air is all about, just give us a bit of a brief overview. What is Mercy Air, and what is it that they do?
Okay. Mercy Air is a South African-based Christian charity, and we are based on a farm up in the top northeast corner near Kruger Wildlife Park, and we support missionaries, mission work, and humanitarian work using aircraft. So we have two fixed-wing aircraft and three helicopters. And we assist mission in everywhere that we can get to by the range of our aircraft. So that's from South Africa up into Mozambique, Zimbabwe, up as far as Malawi, and over to the west, Namibia, Eswatini, and local areas within the range of the mission.
So you're helping missionaries. I mean, there's a few parts there. So one of those, I'm guessing, is what helping missionaries get about because it would take too long to drive.
Right. I mean, some places in this world are still inaccessible because of flooding, because of awful roads, because of natural events. And we tend to transport missionaries into those areas in the fixed wing aircraft. And then helicopters are more expensive per mile. And we tend to use the helicopters for the short little hops to get into villages and really remote places. And you know that there's not a village in Africa that doesn't have a football pitch these days. And it's usually a bit of scrubby wasteland that floods, but it's the right size for a helicopter. And frequently we're assisting Bible classes. We help one mission that has over 1,000 students doing Bible classes,
Wow.
and they meet together in groups. They come to the nearest village, and then we will take the pastor or the teacher into that village. But we're also doing medical work. We're assisting the government to do what they're supposed to be doing with vaccinating people. And because they are getting a free ride in a helicopter, they're able to do it, whereas they wouldn't set off for a week in a canoe to produce the results that they need.
So with the missionary stuff, it's partially because I mean I would also imagine maybe not even safe if there are roads. Perhaps they wouldn't be quite so safe.
Yeah, I mean, there's an issue even with a Land Cruiser or something like that. You try and drive it from the south to the north in Mozambique, you will wreck it. And spares are difficult to come by and difficult to get there and difficult to fit. And we work in areas where using aviation is cost effective and mission effective. You know, it's not just for the fun of flying around in aeroplanes. Exactly the opposite. Everything's costed. Is this going to give an advantage to the mission? You know.
I think of aviation. I immediately think this has got to be expensive. So how does Mercy Air generate the funds that it needs in order to do? Because a missionary goes from point A to point B. It's going to be paid for. There's fuel. There's
Yeah,
engineers. There's pilots. There's time. There's
yeah.
accommodation. All that. So how do Mercy Air raise funds?
There is. And Mercier is entirely supported by charitable funds, donations. We have offices in Germany, in Switzerland, and the USA. We don't have one in the UK, actually. But each hour of flying costs £220.
Wow.
Or if you like, it costs £70 to do 50 miles of flying. And usually we've got two rates of covering the costs. If it's a mission job on a mission rate, we say if we want to get these people from there to there, it'll cost so much. How much can you contribute? How much have we got? We do the occasional commercial job We did something for the Wildlife Service fairly recently that was exciting. As long as they are humanitarian or ecological good stuff, we're not flying millionaires around to visit their resorts and things like this. We took 9 wild dogs from a wild dog breeding farm, and this is the rare African wild dog from a wild dog breeding place in South Africa via 3 countries to Malawi to be released. And we had 9 little wild dogs, all anaesthetized, wearing little coats, and 3 vets in the back of the aeroplane. And that was funded by a wildlife charity. But normally it's a combination of funds we can raise and funds the missionaries can raise. All our staff, our full-time staff, expat staff, are volunteers and are unpaid. So if the pilots come in for free, that makes it cheaper to start.
So there's a whole raft of ways of which you're bringing money in, but I suppose with things like commercial, some of the commercial work you can do, that's going to help into the pot, I suppose, to pay for other stuff.
That's exactly the reason. And unfortunately, nothing in the airplane world is cheap, but we try and make it as cheap as possible. And it's, as I say, where it's cost effective. I previously spent a short time with a mission organization in Madagascar called Hover Aid that actually run hovercraft where it's cost effective. The only people in the world running hovercraft up the rivers of Madagascar, wow, where it works and where it's cost effective. You can't get an airplane, you can't get a truck. We use our fixed wing aircraft and our helicopters in combination to try and produce a cost effective package to do medical work, humanitarian work, even ecological work, but our main focus is Christian mission.
Wow. I like aircraft. I especially like helicopters. People tell me they are just far too complicated, too many moving parts, but there's something, I don't know. I like a helicopter. If I see one or hear one, I'm stopping what I'm doing to look, because I just think they're amazing and they can go places that other aircraft can't. And I love how you're using particularly helicopters in certain scenarios to make people's lives better.
Okay. I mean, I was actually a chief technician aviation working in the helicopter world in the Navy Air Arm, the Fleet Air Arm here in the UK, for a total of 41 years. So I have a rough idea how helicopters work. And the squirrels that we use, made by Airbus, are in fact the simplest helicopter I've ever seen. I was amazed that everything is done manually. It's a bit like having the model of car that doesn't have the electric windows. You know, there's one less thing to go wrong. Yeah. And I was amazed to be talking to my pilot and find for the last 2 hours he'd been height holding purely manually as we were going through the valleys and over the jungle, because it was the cheap variant that didn't have the height hold, but it was safely flown and it was cost effective. These little squirrels do the job. We have our own lovely maintenance guy who's working on those in South Africa, and also we're very much supported by Mercy Air Switzerland, which is close to where those Airbus helicopters are produced.
I love that, the simplicity of it. I think if it isn't going to break, that's a good thing. If you're in the middle of nowhere, if you can have less electronics, that's going to be good, isn't it?
I always used to get quite nervous. I would go up to the Zambezi Delta to help set up a forward airbase from which we operate 1 or 2 of our helicopters. And I would always be nervous that I was never coming back, because my experience of naval helicopters was there were 4,000 things to go wrong, and every now and again one of them did, which stopped you flying. Whereas with the squirrels, it's more like 40 things to go wrong. And they were proving to be extremely reliable.
Simple can be good. How did you get into Mercier? I mean, okay, you've given us part of the story. I suppose you've 40 years Fleet Air Arm in aviation, but what brought you into Mercier specifically?
That's a little bit of a story. For a long time, I was in the military. I visited very poor places in the world. I was stationed once in Djibouti, and I'd seen poverty. But in 2007, I got into mountaineering and trekking with my brothers, and we decided we were going to go and climb Kilimanjaro. So we set ourselves have a holiday together, and for 25 years I'd been sponsoring children through Compassion, Compassion
Yeah.
Childcare. And I happened to notice that one of the children I was sponsoring lived at the foot of Kilimanjaro,
Wow.
and another one lived in Uganda. So I thought, okay, I'll go a week early and I'll stay an extra week and I'll visit one child and I'll visit the other one after we've done this mountain thing. And I visited these two children, and to be honest, I was almost in shock. Poverty became personal for the first time.
Hmm.
I realized that these guys that I've been corresponding with, they lived such a different life. And my little bit of help was making so much difference to their life.
Hmm.
I remember talking and spending the day with them and seeing where they lived, and then going back to a hotel room I was paying $9 a day for. What's that? £8, including breakfast. And this had a toilet. It had electric light. It had fairly crummy shower, but it had a shower, things like that. And they didn't have any of these things. And I thought, I have got to help in some way. So from that, I tried helping with various disaster relief organizations. And then I took a motorbike trip around Africa. I wanted to see what it was really like. So I took a motorbike by myself from Kampala to Cape Town, about 3 or 4 months, and visited various charities and missions to see what they do, including a lot of compassion kids. I just felt that I needed to take early retirement for what I was doing in the Ministry of Defence. I was actually writing lessons on a new type of helicopter, how to fly it, how to fix it. And I took early retirement and went to work in Tanzania for voluntary service overseas, the British government helped voluntary organization. After a while with them, I decided I'd like to see something where I saw the results a bit more straightforward. So I volunteered for Mercy Ships and spent 3, 4 trips with Mercy Ships as an electrician and a chief electrician. So this is a long story, isn't it? So how did I end up with Mercy? Yeah, a friend of mine, a Christian in the Navy, who used to be the boss of 700 Squadron near where I worked at the air station, became the director of Mercy Air, and said, just send a casual email saying, if you're free, we could use you to come and do something useful electrical, being an electrician. And I was free, so I went for 3 months, and since then I've been going back to help Mercy Air as a part-time volunteer. I don't work on the aircraft, apart from refueling them and loading stuff up and putting underslung loads on and things like that. But I do general electrical work with the missions at our air bases and at our main base in South Africa. So that's how I ended up as a part-time volunteer with Mercy Air.
So where are you based? Are you based in the UK or are you based in
Yeah.
Africa?
I live at home. My wife still works. She allows me to go off for 3 months at the time, and then I come back home again. So I'm a bit of a part-time ersatz missionary as compared to the people who are actually out there working full-time, who I have considerable regard for, you know.
Wow. It's amazing what you're doing. And I love the story of how you didn't just get involved with a child from Compassion UK, but you actually have gone to visit them, which, that takes some considerable effort. And like you said, it wasn't a pretty hotel. It wasn't a pretty place. And yet you were able to go and meet. And how did that really help you to identify personally? What is it that made you think this is personal now?
Wow, it was so personal. I just tell you incidents. This guy, the first lad I met, I'd been sponsoring for about 5 years, and he was called Rami, which is short for Ramadani, because his father had been a Muslim. Father had deserted the mother and left. And Rami's mother had the choice of either him going to a madrasa and getting a free education, or going into as a compassion sponsored child. And when I talked to Rami, Rami, his whole life had been improved by this small contribution I was making. I mean, one example was they lived in a hut that had a dirt floor, and at night they had to barricade the door with the bed in case of drunks trying to come in and molest the women who were in there. So they filled in the window, and so they had no light at all. When it was dark, it was dark. And when I was visiting him, he said, "Oh, look, here, let me show you. This is the oil lamp, a paraffin lamp, a tilly lamp that Compassion have given me so I can do my homework."
Wow.
So up until a point where he got a lamp and a paraffin lamp, he couldn't do his homework, you know. And it reminds me of a verse in 2 Peter about bringing you out of darkness into wonderful light,
Yeah.
you know. And a paraffin lamp, you know, what did it cost in the market? £1, you know. But his whole life, he was able to do his homework. And to cut a long story short, he progressed through school. He joined the Tanzanian Wildlife Service as a student, became a qualified wildlife guide, and now, coming full circle, he runs a business taking people up Kilimanjaro, the treks. And all this is a result of a small leg up, you know, not a handout, a hand up. You know, just an oil lamp and an education. And these were all things that we took for granted. My children that are grown up, strangely, one of them is actually a Navy helicopter pilot, but my children that have grown up and got employment and things they take them for granted in life. You know? Does that answer your question, or have I just waffled on?
No, I think you've perfectly answered it, and I think it shares some of your heart as well as what you're doing now. I mean, you know, you're doing stuff. You're not getting paid for it. You're doing to serve, but that explains a lot of why you would want to do that. Because at one level, why would you want to do that? But actually, I think it paints a picture of who you are, your heart, your passion. What's your story of faith in? Because we're talking about Christianity in various guises here, but what's your story of faith?
Unusually, for many people I meet, I remember very distinctly becoming a Christian at the age of 10 years old. I remember listening to a preacher who didn't preach on a verse that stuck in my mind and declaring to my parents that I'd become a Christian. And a usual childhood commitment. But later on, when I joined the Navy, you're a young man. You're amongst other young men, and for a few years it was a bit way hey, let's experience everything that's possible, you know. And I remember one morning a guy coming to see me and saying, "It's Sunday morning, Steve. I know you've got a bit of a hangover, but why don't you come to church with me?" Because he said, "God's told me that's where you belong. You know, that's your real family." And I did. And it was, you know, and I very much came back to the Lord and have experienced Christian fellowship as a somebody in the Navy in all the continents of the world, I think, except Antarctica. I've actually shared, I don't know if there are a Christian fellowship within Antarctica, but I think I've shared fellowship all over the world now. And later on, when I was on Mercy Ship, my old chief engineer, who put it rather well, he said, "You know, Steve, you go through phases in life, 3 main phases." He said, learning, earning, and returning. And he said, "You and me, we're old enough. We're in the returning phase. We got enough. Let's give something back. Aren't we fortunate? Aren't we blessed?" That, you know, I use this in one of my illustrations when I'm preaching. I said, "Folks, you won the lottery of life. Trust me, You could have been born in Mozambique. You could have been born in Djibouti. You could have been born in Tanzania, India, all the rest of it. But you've really won the lottery of life. Look where you got born. Look at these immense privileges and blessings that you have. It's time to try and give something back.
I love that idea. So I think there's a lot in that when you're first starting out in life, you've left school, you've got a qualification, you've got a job, whatever. Now all you want to really do is get money and get a house and get a better house and a better car and a better job. And
Yeah.
yet actually there's so much more to life than that circle, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But actually there's a lot more that you can do, which is much more rewarding in so many different ways, which is what you're talking about with what you're doing, especially with Mercier now.
Yeah, and again, I emphasize I'm only a part timer, as compared to the people who, even in their, have given up part of their earning phase, if you like, to go out into that ministry because they felt called to work out their faith in practical action. And I have the greatest respect for them, and we should be supporting them. And one of the little ways we can do it is by offering ourselves for what time we have to go out there and encourage support, and pray from knowledge.
Mm.
Don't not just vague prayers for the people of Africa, the people for this village, for this guy that I know, for this family that I know. You know, um, I think that can be very fulfilling. You know?
Very much.
Yeah, there's a verse in, let me get my reference right, Proverbs 19, verse 17, I think it is, when it says, um, he who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him. Now, paying for your own expenses or working on the mission field, you're never going to get rich in terms of pounds, shillings, pence, rand, kwacha, whatever it is. But being rich in other ways is what's most important.
Amen. One of our radio shows, it's called Endurance. It's about faith and fitness, but that's all around the fact that physical fitness is good,
Okay,
spiritual
that's good.
exercise is better.
Okay.
And it's the idea of, yeah, it's great to be fit, but you know what? Being fit spiritually is so much more rewarding, which is what it says in Timothy. It's just, yeah, get yourself fit, be physically looking after your body. But you know what? Working out spiritually is so much more rewarding. In the same way that we can earn money. Yes, great, it's good. We can support other people, but working out spiritually and volunteering your time in Africa to fly a plane. I mean, that's huge because although, like you say, you're not going to get rich quick on that one, but there is a reward for that.
Mm. Well, I very much hope that you'll be able to interview the full timers in this way out at Mercier and ask them the same questions.
Hmm.
And they face they face quite a considerable um, the isolation and the situation that they put themselves in, and there seem to be a limited number of people coming forward who are prepared to do this these days, from our rich missionary heritage. But they do face many problems with isolation and being away from family. And I always found when I was in the Navy, or I even find now, the minute I move out of UK territorial waters, everything in the house crumbles. There's a car crash, the heating won't work, the drains are blocked, all the rest of it. And many of the people you talk to in the mission field full time have sacrificed a lot to follow their savior.
Amen. Yeah, we hope to get some interviews with those people as well, because I like to tell people stories, but it's great that you can speak to the people rather than of the people. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good start, but if we can speak to actual people doing the job, then it brings it alive in a different way. Like, you're not just talking about Mercy. Yeah, I mean, you've been out there, you've worked out there, so your passion, your heart, it comes out so well. So I'm really grateful for your time sharing this, especially with the bad back and sitting down. When are you back again off to Africa.
Everyone says that. That's just like being in the Navy. Uh, they would say, I'd come home and they say, "Oh, it's good to see you, Steve. When you off again?"
Yeah.
I say, "Gosh, that's a dose of cold water." You know, I don't know. Is this situation? I'll be honest with you. I'm getting a bit sneaky in my old age. As I say, I celebrated my 69th birthday by falling off a ladder 2 days later. So I find, from my point of view, it works better for me to go to Africa in the middle of winter, because in South Africa it ain't the middle of winter,
Yeah.
and you can get more work out of me when I'm reasonably warm. But I when there's a need. There'll be we don't like to waste fuel, and we like to bundle together various jobs. And with Mercier, even though the pilots and the air operations people and the secretary is working in an office some of the time, when the need arises, we'll get together a working party. We used to call it a task force in the military. Get together a task force, see how many places there are in the airplane, and I might get a message, we're going up into Mozambique to Assam or Nisangeri or wherever it is on this date. Let us know if you're available, and I'll come and join when there's a need. But we'll see. There could also, Mercier have been involved in emergency relief for several disasters. And I know a little bit about load lifting and operating helicopters in the field. And again, something like that might happen. And I might be able to go out and help as required. I remember a very similar request with Mercy Ships when I was acting as a chief electrician there, and COVID came along and they all got put into quarantine in Tenerife, and they weren't even allowed off the ship. And the one thing they did was run out of electricians. So I got the call and went out for a couple of months to stand in the breach. So answer is I don't know.
Fair enough. I'm just curious whether it was like a rotational basis or you just go
No,
as needed.
no. Yeah, and I'm sure something will come up.
I would imagine so. Steve, thank you. If people want to know more about Mercier, is there a website that people can go and visit and find out more?
Okay, well, the most important thing about Mercier is to be aware that there is another Mercier, which is an air ambulance organization in California. That is not us. Okay, so if you go on the web and you just Google Mercier, you might get an air ambulance in California. In fact, what you want to do is you want to go www Mercier, all one word, .co.za, and you'll appreciate that ZA is in fact South Africa.
Yeah.
Or you could put in Mercier South Africa. So it's mercier.co.za.
Fine.
And that will tell you all about it.
Thank you. It's been fascinating to talk to you. I loved chatting with you at the gathering, just finding out a little bit in a very noisy environment. So I'm just really grateful we got this opportunity to talk a little bit more, slightly more relaxed way about what's going on and what you're doing. Steve from Mercier, thank you so much for your time. And I hope your back recovers very, very soon. As a former back pain sufferer from many years ago, you have my absolute sympathy on that one. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.